It is Wednesday, 18 May 2022. Today's Skidmark is about sanctions. That's a word that are being thrown around all over the place. Growing up in a country that was subjected to severe Western sanctions has given me some insight in what sanctions can do. The thing that we must take into consideration is that there is basically no country outside the so-called collective West that are not subjected to some form of sanction by the West. And these sanctions are mostly due to this arrogant attitude of the West and this view that they have that they are the world controllers. The tragedy of sanctions is that political leaders start those sanctions against other political leaders, and they never, not once, mention the effects of those sanctions to the normal people of those countries that are being sanctioned. In South Africa, we were forced to become self-sufficient and self-reliant under their sanctions. And even under those extreme sanctions, our economy grew and jobs were created and provided, and we ended up with an arms industry of world quality, and we also became a nuclear power. I cannot understand what does the West think with these sanctions of theirs. They are alienating the population of the non-West world. The non-Western world population actually hates the Western Empire because of this arrogance and this constant bullying. Now, if we look at what happened now with the Ukraine war, to me it is more or less poetic justice. As usual, the Western leaders embarked on a vicious economical sanction war against Russia without really thinking about it. But decades of arrogance has made them so arrogant that they think they know everything. The way that those economic sanctions against Russia is backfiring is actually spectacular. Now, Russia is in a little bit of a different position than what South Africa was. Russia is a big country, it's got a big population, and it's got a hell of a lot of natural resources. Plus, over the past 5 years or so, the Russian government has invested heavily in their agricultural sector. So Russia is self-sufficient for energy and it's self-sufficient for food, and they don't have foreign debt. So they're one of the countries that can actually survive sanctions from the West, and ridiculous as it may sound, they will thrive under those sanctions because it makes them more independent. I'm listening and I'm reading a lot about the Europeans with their sanctions, and then they are planning a next barge of sanctions, where the cold facts are the European economy is crashing. Inflation is out of control. They are so deep into debt that there's no way that this generation will ever be able to pay it back. And the same is for America. America is so deep in the debt that it's going to take a number of generations to pay that debt back if they stop spending like crazy people. But let's see. But in Europe, it is quite obvious. The ordinary citizens of Europe is suffering now under the reverse effects of those maniacs that started the sanctions in February. And the people is going to suffer more. There are commentators that are of the opinion that some of the European countries will be in deep depression by the end of the year. Just look at the food prices, look at the energy prices, look at the food shortages in Europe. And it's getting worse every day. And then I have to mention this absolute stupid reporting by the Western media about the Azovstal surrenders. They called it all types of things, and the most popular was to brand it as an evacuation. That is not an evacuation, that's a surrender. And maybe the West should take a tip from that surrender and surrender on this economic war they're fighting against Russia, while they still have some life in their economies. I don't know, within the next 3-4 months, that life will be gone. And it's the citizens of Europe and America that is going to suffer. But, as I said earlier, I see it as poetic justice. Let them take the pain from sanctions, like the non-West world had to endure for decades.